Hello my dear sewing friends, it's Alisa here and welcome to another Made from Scraps episode. I must say those are some of my favorite videos to work on and I hope that you feel the same because every time there is a fabric scrap creation, it is unique, it is interesting, it has a story, and this time we are going to be using fabric scraps and leftovers that we had from this fabric scrap project. Now, if this top does look familiar, that's because we just made it together in one of the Made from Scraps episodes, and some of the fabric that I used here came from two damaged t-shirts. They only had one sleeve, that's how they came, and I do realize that I didn't really explain in the previous video where those t-shirts came from, so I'll definitely touch upon that as we continue working on this project. But I also thought, well, wait a second, I have, whatever cutoffs I had from this peach one, so why don't we use that combined with other fabric scraps and make something fun? Alright, so I'm getting started with a simple t-shirt pattern. Mine is just traced. It's exactly the same t-shirt pattern that I used for this top. You can draft your own, you can trace your own, you can buy your own. The main point that it's nothing fancy, but we will make it fun. The first thing that I do have to do is I have to determine how much fabric I have in this peach because I think that I'm going to be using this as the sort of main fabric of the project, sort of like the blue one is right over here. So it does look like I would have enough for somewhat of a front pattern piece. Obviously there's not enough for a full one, but for a good chunk. The story is a little bit different about the back pattern piece. We can of course switch them, but it doesn't really make that much of a difference. It's not enough here either, but there's a good chunk that can be used. And of course this part over here as well. This was the back pattern piece of this t-shirt. Once I cut this apart, we can also use this fabric scrap for something else as well. I must say that's a very good start. A positive indicator that the project might go as planned, just this once. So the base is determined, and then I did go through this big old tub of fabric scraps and I landed on two color combinations. One are these different shades of orange and the other one are these shades of green. Now if I do decide to go with the orange option, I would probably need to dye this a little bit because to my liking it has just a little bit more sort of pink tint to it than orange, so that's kind of caveat number one. On the other hand, if I do go with the green option, it does remind me in the color scheme of sort of like a beautiful, fresh, very gentle lily pond, but I think I would need a little bit more pink in it than it currently has, or perhaps not. Maybe I'm just going to leave it as is. So I just have to take a look what fabric scraps I have, how much, and what I can do with them. Alright, as we know, this might take a little while, so while I do sort out these fabric scraps into piles and see what I can do with them, let me share with you where I got those two t-shirts that only had one sleeve. And as always, not sponsored, I would definitely let you know if it was. But last time I shared with you that I got these fabric scraps from Thunder Pants, and there they sew their undergarments, and once they have offcuts, they sell them as fabric scraps. But there's another place where you can buy fabric scraps. It's called Fab Scrap. They're actually a non-profit organization. They're a textile recycling center, and what they do is they get offcuts and fabric scraps and also production samples from the design houses that are located in New York. Needless to say, I think we all know that fashion industry definitely contributes to a lot of fabric waste. So instead of letting all of that go to landfill, Fab Scrap actually takes that, they sort it out, and then you can purchase fabric scraps for your own creations. So I've bought fabric scraps from them, and they also have an option of purchasing mendables. Now mendables are the design samples of the garment that were made before the final version actually hits the production. So I did order a couple of packs of mendables from Fab Scrap, and some of them are with markings, some of them are clearly with cutouts where they were making adjustments probably on the model or maybe on the dress form, you can sometimes see that they were making an armhole a little bit deeper, this or that. Or like in this case, I had two t-shirts that only came with one sleeve. Anyway, that's how that came about. And you can probably feel that I am exploring and that I am trying to find alternative solutions to resources for fabric, for other sewing notions, anything else that I need for my sewing projects. And I actually started doing this last year, about in the middle of last year. It just takes a little while for me to process through all of that, to see what works, what doesn't, what I am ready to suggest or not. So you'll probably see a little bit more. But yeah, Fab Scrap is one of those places. As always, I will leave all necessary information for you guys in a description. Now, as I was going through all of the fabric scraps, my eye really started gravitating towards the selection of the greens, and I thought, you know what? Let's just go with that. And from here, I did sort them through a little bit further. We have small green, large green, small light green, large light green, and just a little bit of this kind of green, which might be a problem. Here's my not so pretty idea sketch, and to bring it to life, I'm going to start with a blank front pattern piece. Now, even though this particular design is going to be symmetrical, I do find that it helps to visualize it a little bit better when I have a full pattern piece in front of me. Now from here, I had a couple of iterations of the same design going back and forth, varying the width and whatnot, and then I finally settled on this one. Now initially I was pretty set on using all three of the greens, but as you saw through the process of sort of cleaning up and clarifying the design, and also sorting through the fabric scraps and realizing what I have, and most importantly what I don't have, I've decided just to go with the dark green, the really light green, and the peach. And now that I'm looking at the final selection of the colors, I'm thinking that maybe that's for the best. Maybe the bright green was just a tad too bright. And as always, colors, the design, the shape, all of that is a very, very personal choice. And my hope is that when you watch these kind of videos, that you look beyond what you see, because you might like the color combination, but you really might not care for the design, and that's fine. Get inspired by the color. Or perhaps you're the other way around. You really don't like the colors, but the design might seem like an interesting idea. We'll take that, because I find that when we're working with such unique set of resources like fabric scraps and whatnot, oftentimes we look for a perfect match, but perfect match does not exist, because your circumstances are very different from mine, especially when it comes for fabric scraps. So I truly hope that you look beyond what you see, that you get inspired, that you get that spark, and you make something beautiful. There we go. The top two pattern pieces are sorted. So far, so good. And now onto the bottom piece of the front. Now, I started cutting it out only to remember that I actually really wanted to give it more of a pink shade, and I really should have done it before I started cutting it out. So that's a mess up on my part, but luckily I did have a jug of hot pink dye from doing these pants, so I figured, well, all I have to do is to dilute it enough to give me a super light pink. There's of course a bit more to dyeing fabric, but I promise you it isn't as complex as it might seem, and I find that I really enjoy it. Now, if you do have a few cuts of fabric where the shade of color just isn't right and is a little bit off, it might be a good way to adjust it. Now, as soon as my fabric is washed and dry, I can now move on to actually putting it all together. The construction technique here is exactly the same as in this t-shirt. So first, all of the pieced panels were constructed using a lightning stitch on a sewing machine. Then the seam and the seam allowances were pressed open, and then in my case I did cover stitch them, but in your case you can also achieve a very similar result with a twin needle on a sewing machine. And here I also wanted to say thank you so much to the members of the channel. Thank you for being here and thank you for all of your support. And I wanted to remind you that there is a members extra deep dive episode for this t-shirt, and there is one coming up for this project. And as always, in members extra deep dive episodes, we look inside of the garments, we discuss the finishing techniques, we look for alternatives, we talk about fabric suggestions, we also discuss some interesting details in and out, and oftentimes I also show you an additional garment by using the same design or same technique, so that way you get inspired, you get an extra idea, and we also learn something interesting along the way. So thank you so much for your support, and tune in for those members extra deep dives. Now, if you're not a member and you're wondering, wait a second, what this is all about, then you can take a look at it in the description of this video. I'll leave all the information there. Let me show you the sleeve pattern piece. And here I decided to go with the same wavy design as I did on the front. However, when it came time to do the back, I wanted to alter it just by a little bit because the green really spoke to me and I wanted to make it look more like a yoke. And I do think that that's actually going to work out really well. So let's take a look. Here I have all of the pattern pieces. We have the back, the front, and 2 sleeves. And from here, all I have to do is put them all together. The rest of the construction was simply done on a serger, but you can of course do it on a sewing machine as well. And beforehand, I did baste most of the areas where I needed for the seams to align really well, although you will see that in some areas they still managed to move a little bit even after I basted them together. But other than that, you put it together like a regular t-shirt. Alright, let's take a look at the final result. Well, there you have it, another slightly sporty but fun scrappy t-shirt. I hope that you got an extra idea. Speaking of which, if you did like this project and the previous scrappy t-shirt, then I'm pretty sure you're going to like this one as well. And I know that the color combination might not be everybody's cup of tea. I totally get it. Just like I mentioned before, skip the color combination, watch for the idea, and that might be just the one that you need for your next fabric scrap project. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all. Happy scrappy sewing, and I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye!